Our first panel now, we'd like to welcome Mr. Bob Picard as an individual and allegedly no stranger to these precincts, including this building, but we'll leave that explanation for another time. Mr. Picard, you have up to 5 minutes to deliver your opening remarks.
Let me thank the Chair and all members for welcoming me here today to communicate what happened with my experience at the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which was a traumatic, dramatic, and in my case, it was a very, very patriotic moment because I felt that our membership in this organization was not giving this country a single thing of tangible value that we could proudly explain to people here in our country that their membership in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank would be delivering them back home. Since Xi Jinping proposed the AIIB in 2013, AIIB, it never became well known globally, and what public awareness it did have, it was often tainted by a perceived association with the controversial and increasingly aggressive geopolitical policies of the People's Republic of China, especially the Belt and Road Initiative. It was in this context that I was approached to help build a profile and to shape a positive public image for AIIB. I was asked to join as the bank's global communications chief in late 2021, not long after the two Michaels were released. Having previously served in senior capacities at public relations firms such as Edelman and Burson Marsteller, with 16 years of Asia-Pacific experience, I was well placed to help AIIB communicate its story. But before signing on, I had some concerns about whether the PRC government was exercising undue influence at the bank. Now, AIIB's published governance, it did allay these concerns somewhat, and I was reassured by the presence of Western countries on the shareholders list, including, of course, my own country, our country, Canada. It didn't take me long, though, to realize after joining the bank that the reality of power inside of AIIB does not match the rhetoric. And to see how respected G7 countries like Canada, with a reputation, were brandished like trophy members to help attract Western capital and to avoid hostile policy consequences from U.S. authorities in Washington. Inside of the bank, CCP members wield power in many of the most important positions from the top down. Mr. Jin, the president of the bank, himself a staunch CCP member and former Red Guard, often articulates Chinese government policy as if it were his own. As the bank's spokesperson, I advised him that he should communicate his views as the leader of a multilateral organization and refrain from parroting the PRC government's point of view. Now, even though I was supposedly in charge of all global communications for the bank, I subsequently discovered that Mr. Jin's office, dominated by Communist Party members, was directly involved in crafting messaging with PRC media for the domestic Chinese market that differed from what the bank was communicating in English to overseas audiences. Now, devising public messaging to distinguish AIIB from the controversial BRI, which of course is Xi Jinping's signature #1 most important geopolitical expansion project. It was seen as a critical priority, and that was requested of me directly by President Jin. And yet privately, these two PRC initiatives seemed uncomfortably more intertwined and interrelated than I had been led to believe. In my own department, a CCP member, just imagine this, was appointed as my personal assistant. I found out that this Communist Party member appointed as my assistant was secretly reporting directly to the most senior party member in Mr. Jin's office. This arrangement, to say the least, was outside of the bank's supposed reporting lines. So I had an in-house snitch reporting directly to Communist Party members what was going on. Every journalist I met with, every civil society leader I met with. So, interestingly, in 2022, I'd been there for a number of months at this point. The Communist Party presence in the president's office at AIIB, it was bolstered by the arrival of a new colleague whose job description nobody seemed to know, except that he was supposed to be the new party guy. Within a few months, Mr. Jin's office suite underwent a remodeling. Security locks were installed, controlling the access of all AIIB staff. The bank's vice president, none of them Chinese, needed to be buzzed into his office for the very first time, and that created a lot of resentment internally. This cocooning of the AIIB president is consistent with how the information he receives and the issues he decides are filtered through two CCP officials whose offices were closest physically to his, inside of this bubble. Now, at the AIIB, almost nothing Mr. Jin, the president, sees, says, or does happens without the deep involvement of these two Communist Party officials. And how do I know this? I know this because the communications department, for which I was responsible, was located right next to Mr. Jin's office.
Now, Mr. Picard, your 5 minutes has expired. I'm sure you have more to say, and perhaps you can work that into answers to some of the questions that you'll be receiving, which will...
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Cormier.
Okay, so IT asked me to double check, so I think you can hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, we can see you too. There you go. All right, Mr. Seaback, the first 6 minutes are yours.
Mr. Picard, I'm actually going to suggest that you continue where you were so we can get the benefit of your entire statement.
Okay, it's not much longer. I'll go as quickly as I can. Thank you for that. Okay. I would say that the thing to understand here, the key point, is that the AIIB President's Office is unusually powerful, even in the context of a multilateral organization. It's extremely top-down. And that office is a cocoon physically cut off, and it is dominated by senior Communist Party members. So this heel-clicking obedience is the way I would describe it at the President's Office. It's valued more highly than any other virtue at the bank, including, notably, freedom of expression, or thinking differently than other people do, which is kind of ironic when you consider it's a multilateral organization. I think that you have to realize that externally, over and over again, externally AIIB says that it's an apolitical, independent organization. But honestly, internally, the atmosphere there in Beijing is anything but. It's political and it's CCP political. There's a big difference between those two. And that has helped to create a toxic culture inside of this organization. Now, when I first resigned last May, citing my concerns about the CCP's pronounced, profound, and pervasive influence in the everyday operating business of the bank and its toxic impact on the culture, Mr. Jin, the president, did not accept my resignation. He talked me out of it. And I was kind of shocked that the bank did not deny and did not confirm my allegations or concerns about CCP influence. I was simply informed that the president's office did not like my raising the taboo CCP topic. After accepting my second resignation in June, when I left in a hurry for Japan, the bank started attacking me personally. Journalists covering the news of my departure, some of whom I'd known a long time before I joined the bank, they warned me that bank executives were trash-talking me off the record. And this was well before, of course, any bank investigation took place. Hundreds of pro-AIIB, pro-CCP bots on Twitter targeted me with insults, and I was accused of being an American agent of espionage, a white supremacist, a neo-colonialist, or part of some nefarious Canadian government plot to embarrass China. Which brings me to this. When I announced my departure from the bank, I did not ask the government of Canada to do anything. Period. I acted in an individual capacity out of what I considered to be ethical responsibility and also a patriotic duty, frankly. I have cooperated, though. I have supported the review conducted by the Government of Canada and provided information to the Department of Finance in this regard. Indeed, I note that several of the topics of the extended review mirror concerns that I raised with the Department of Finance on transparent governance, management competence, and proper professional culture at the bank. So finally, this point, when Mr. Xi proposed the AIIB, he was a relatively new leader, still seen as a potential reformer, maybe somebody like Deng Xiaoping in 1978. But now we have a neo-Maoist leader of China, an authoritarian dictator who, well, look, after so much political interference, things look much different than they did then. We all hoped that by placing this bet on a multilateral institution in China, that we could have a window on Asia's development. Well, I think what we have now is a bank for China's influence, where China gets the exclusive geopolitical credit for the lending of the bank.
Mr. Pickard, I want to give you as much time, but I actually do need to ask some questions.
Go ahead.
So first thing I want to ask, you said not giving a single tangible benefit to Canada as a result of the involvement. To the best of your knowledge, has any of the money that Canada has provided to the AIIB, has that been refunded back to Canada?
Not that I know. And I don't know the details of that kind of a financial transaction. I did not take documents from the bank when I left AIIB, and I would not have access to that information now.
Are you familiar with the PRC 2017 National Intelligence Law?
Not by that name, no.
Okay.
I'm aware of how business is done in China, but that's a general statement.
The law obligates individuals, organizations, and institutions to assist the PRC security and intelligence services in carrying out a wide variety of intelligence work. So that would apply to all Chinese citizens. So would that sort of mesh with your experience with what went on at the AIIB? It's as a result of the national intelligence law?
Oh, definitely. It's a question of, first loyalty. I believe that it's very clear in the bank that would be the responsibility of the 30 towards 40% of the staff who are Chinese nationals, many of whom are of course CCP members.
So as you reflect back on the comments you've made about the bank, its structure, the CCP talking points, et cetera, would the fact that this law obligated individuals to behave in a certain way, does that sort of, to excuse the phrase, square the circle for you on why this was going on?
A short answer, please, Mr. Picard.
I'm sorry?
Short answer?
Yeah, I think so, yes. I believe it's what I saw, what I experienced is consistent with what you're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Seaback. And I'll go to Mr. Fragascaris for 6 minutes or less.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Picard, for being here today. There's a range of different things that you've outlined for us in your opening statement in the previous round. I just wonder if you could provide us with a summary of the key allegations that you're making, because I have a sense, and based on previous media reports, of where you're coming from, but
sure.
In the testimony, understand the specifics of what you're alleging.
Well, the specifics of what I'm alleging.
With respect to AIIB.
I am alleging undue Chinese Communist Party influence in the everyday operation of the bank, where key positions in the bank, where decisions made in the bank on discretionary spending or important projects that need approval, who gets the nod on budget projects. There's a whole latitude of everyday operating decisions inside of the bank, which either go to the board or go through management for like a rubber stamp decision, but are not decided by them. The president's office has a considerable degree of ability inside of the bank to make decisions. Most of what I got approved, keep in mind I ran the communications department, so that's my lens on the AIIB. Almost anything that I was able to get approved for my department, moving to the 10th floor, opening a broadcast media studio, budget increases, 6 new headcounts, out-of-cycle headcounts, all of that was decided by the president's office, not by the management or by the board of the bank.
So that's your main allegation.
My main allegation is that has created a toxic culture inside of the bank where people know that there's a subterranean network of relationships, like the cool kids in school, as it were. I was warned about the power of Chinese Communist Party members in league with each other as a favored class inside of the bank. They have undue power and control inside of the bank.
Okay.
which stifles free expression in the bank and sours the culture. When I joined the bank, I was told there was a crisis of bullying. And in fact, there was an anti-bullying program that the bank was developing at that time, which we called respectful workplace after I arrived. The departments that were most concerned with bullying were the departments that were under Communist Party members.
My intent here is not to be combative with you, so please don't take the next question as that.
No worries.
What is the specific evidence that you use to back your allegation? I mean, and I need you to be precise. What evidence would you point to? Is there anything concrete, anything electronic, physical, in terms of evidence that you have?
Well, first of all, I left on my own steam for my own reasons. So I don't feel obliged to provide that kind of a detailed document summary of what it is that I observed. I'm an eyewitness. I have opinions. I saw certain things. I'm sharing certain things. I wasn't sworn in today, but I would swear. But if I had taken documents out of the bank, and people keep on asking me, where are the documents? Well, if I'd taken those documents out of the bank, I'd either be in a Chinese jail right now, or I'd be under serious litigation. So I can tell you openly and transparently everything I saw and experienced. I've given you some case study examples. I wrote a column in The Economist, many different interviews with different anecdotes. But if you're looking for a stack of documents marked confidential with a hammer and sickle on them, you're not going to get them from me.
Okay, so you've seen certain things, is
I
what
have seen
you're
it, yeah.
what you're saying.
Sure. Well,
And-
Mr. Shi, sure.
Continue.
Lots
Go
of
ahead.
things.
Go ahead.
First of all, the decision on which countries to go to by the bank president, the Central Asia Summit, which was adjacent to Xi Jinping being there. Last year, around the time that I left the bank, there was a decision about where the president would go and what the president would say. And to me, it was very clear there was a geopolitical piggyback to foster Chinese interest. Now, these photographs weren't published. President Jin of the bank was meeting with world leaders, not with the flag of AIIB, but with the flag of the People's Republic of China. I prevented their publication internally at the bank because I felt it would not look good on a multilateral institution for its president to be seen meeting under the Chinese flag. I was ordered to put on the website of a multilateral institution a statement of condolence when Jiang Zemin, the Chinese previous Chinese leader, died. Our department pushed back. We thought that would not be appropriate because, of course, Queen Elizabeth had just died.
Mr. Picard, I'm sorry to
we
interrupt
didn't
you.
push
You'll have an
anything for her.
opportunity to expand on the answer in other rounds, I'm sure.
Sure.
I just have 45 seconds left. When you raised the allegation with government, how quick was the response? Tell me about that engagement.
That's a very interesting question. That's a good question. As soon as I acted, I heard from the Canadian Embassy in Beijing. And I was in Japan already, and I received a call from an official at the embassy. And he asked me, this is before the government had done anything. It's after I had resigned, after it was in the public domain. And I didn't resign until I was in Japan. And when I was, he was trying to track me down on the phone. And I spoke with him. I don't think we spoke for more than half an hour. And I told him exactly why I was leaving the bank. And a few hours later, I think I was on a flight, and there was the announcement by the government of what it had decided to do to freeze the membership and to review it.
So a very quick response. Thank you.
Yeah,
very
very
much.
quick response.
Yeah, we're out of time for you, Mr. Freigastados. Now, Mr. Picard, are you fluent in French?
Not,
Okay, make
Not-
sure
not
you've got the
anymore.
earpiece and the channel selected because we're about to turn the floor over to Mr. Bergeron for 6 minutes or less.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Would you say that this is the type of situation that's to be found in other international financial institutions, or was it specific to this one?
I've seen that's a very good question because defenders of AIIB have said there's nothing to see here, folks. There's nothing to be concerned about with the Communist Party because Communist Party in Beijing and AIIB, it's just like Republicans and Democrats at the World Bank in Washington. That is a school of opinion. That was a common reaction when I left the bank. Frankly, though, knowing a thing or two about doing business in China and having lived in the United States, I don't think that's a very good analogy. I also happen to have had occasion to see, because of my years in China, how the President's office was working. And I firmly believe that the President's office at AIIB, it is far more powerful and I would say strongman focused, top down, very commanding compared to what I understand to be the case at the ADB in Manila or at the World Bank in Washington, for example. Now that made me think that AIIB almost operated more like a domestic Chinese financial institution than like a multilateral. Multilaterals, I mean, all these different countries, all of these different members, they're supposed to cooperate, communicate, not just top-down command, which was what I saw a lot of at AIIB.
Donc, au-delà de la rhétorique,
So over and beyond rhetoric, according to, saying that you'd see something like this elsewhere, you would say that indeed this was very specific to this institution, this investment bank.
Very much so. No, I haven't worked at the World Bank or the EBRD or these other places, but from what I understand, I mean, the MDBs are not like competitors with each other. It's a very small town. Everyone's very friendly. It's very clubby. So, but I understand through what I hear from different people that based on what I have shared, the top-down strongman system at AIIB was far more pronounced than what you would get from the Japanese president of the ADB in Manila or the World Bank in Washington, D.C. That's what I hear. I was at the bank for 15 months, so I can't pretend to be an expert on that.
outre votre démission, outre la réaction du gouvernement,
Other than your stepping down, your withdrawal, and the Canadians' government's response, is there anything that can be done, do you think, to reform the AIIB, or is it just a lost cause?
I believe that my departure, at the very least, will improve the problems that I identified in terms of, I think that the governance, the competence of management, and the human friendliness of the culture, I think they will be very careful not to make a glaring mistake. But I just got an email before this very committee from one of my sources inside of the bank. And apparently the foreign employees, when they leave the bank, all of their archives, their records are completely removed from the system. And I feel like the reaction at the bank is to they demoted the communications department. I used to report to President Jin, and I guess they punished the department by forcing the department to report through the corporate secretary. I believe that it's going to be hard for them to recruit foreign talent. But I've had lots of people ask me about my experience, and I've provided transparent, open commentary. I wish many of the people who work there very well. There are some talented, well-educated, very, very impressive people there. And I miss my friends in China, my Chinese friends, who I will never see again, probably, because I can't set foot in that country.
comment peut-on justifier que le Canada participe
So what sort of justification is there for Canada participating, especially financially, with such an organization, in such an organization, without having at least a certain percentage of the vote?
I think it's staggering. It's astounding, the extent to which incumbents are invested in. Board members, including Canada's board member, they do not want to make it look like they were asleep at the switch and didn't see this going on. It was the pandemic. All the meetings were on Zoom. AIIB has a non-resident board. Other MDBs have a resident board where the board directors can see what's going on at headquarters. I believe that there was a vacuum of information at the bank that this caused. I also believe that a lot of the feather-nested, extremely well-compensated expatriates who were there do not want to lose that. And I think that incumbent management don't want to admit that there's something to what I have alleged. So I feel like anyone who has a piece of the bank like on their resume, anybody who's associated with it now, it's not in their interests to do what I have done.
Vous avez déclaré que la banque
You have stated that the bank is a resource serving the geopolitical aims of the PRC, the People's Republic of China, that it serves its interests. Do you have any specific examples of projects or decisions made that demonstrate that this is indeed the case?
Again, Mr. Picard, a brief answer, if you could, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think if you look at the countries where the project financing takes place and analyze that with the countries that belong to the BRI and where its bilateral PRC lendings takes place, you'll find a certain significant pattern there. That's what I would emphasize. Also, the selection of where the president of the bank goes, to Hungary to meet with President Orban, for example, or to Serbia, or to meet with countries that appear to be in Central Asia more aligned with Russia and China and the geopolitical situation right now.
Thank you for that. We will now welcome Ms. Ashton, who's subbing in for Ms. McPherson. Ms. Ashton, you have 6 minutes or less.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to indicate that I am a last-minute substitution given the political games being played in the House right now. Certainly will do my best to touch on some of the points here. I understand there was some reference to the AIIB's internal review, and I'm wondering, Mr. Pickford, if you could refer or comment, pardon me, on the fact that the internal review found, among others, that there was no evidence that the AIIB's decision-making organs were unduly and improperly influenced.
Yeah. The internal review was a despicable pack of lies. It was conducted in world record time of 3 weeks. It was not an independent review. It was conducted by a department whose senior leaders were already criticizing me on social media. The day I left the bank, the AIIB said my allegations were baseless. Their report said my allegations were baseless. And I do not believe that they even seriously investigated the core allegations that I made at the time. The internal review also contains factual errors and a variety of other issues that I could raise separately, but I want to be succinct here.
Steve? Well, I mean, we do have some time. What kind of factual errors could you refer to as an example?
Well, for example, the report said that I did not raise concerns about my security, but I raised concerns in writing with the bank's Facilities and Administration Department and with the corporate secretary. And I did so in an email. When Canada expelled that Chinese diplomat back in the spring, I'm just going to turn that off. Back in the spring, I sent an email to the president's office of the bank was copied on this. I said, do I have anything to worry about? Should I be concerned with my security? And I got what I consider to be not a very reassuring reply back from the bank's executive in charge of security, who just by sheer coincidence is a member of the Chinese Communist Party and well known to be so inside of the bank. I also, frankly, I contacted the Canadian embassy and I said, do I have anything to worry about for my safety in light of the two Michaels? And I can't say that I got any kind of reassurance from them either. So this made me wonder, especially when, keep in mind, I think committee members have to understand, AIIB, they knew of my concerns on the Chinese Communist Party, and they were aware of my plans to inform the government of Canada of my concern. They knew this for weeks. So I was concerned for my safety in that context because a lot of stuff was going down inside of the bank that didn't make sense to me, and I found extremely unusual based on what had been going on with my own department. I could get into more detail if we have time for it.
Okay. You also referred to a toxic culture within the organization, and one of the most toxic cultures imaginable, which is quite the allegation. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Well, there have been employee surveys done by, is it Mercer that does the HR consulting reports in large complex organizations? It has identified persistently problems, and the Canadian board member would know this, problems with the staff morale and lack of, particularly, number one issue, I think, would be lack of employee regard for the leadership competence of the bank executives. When I first convened an internal town hall meeting of the bank back in July of 2022, we called it Inspire Day. It was an internal communications event. We used a certain technology where staff members, the 500 staff members, could answer polling questions, and we'd see the results on the screen. And right there on the screen were the words toxic culture. So that clearly is evidence of it, and I provided that to the Department of Finance officials in one of the documents I sent them.
Can you confirm that the AIIB's review found that while it found that the culture was not toxic, made several recommendations that would get at the issue of culture?
They said that they would look at that. Yes, they made, but they also took aim at yours truly. I think they felt I was attacking the bank's reputation, so they attempted to undermine my reputation with what I consider some very slimy or low ethics attacks. I mean, they accused me of having disagreements with staff members. Of course, the people who I had disagreements with were members of the Chinese Communist Party who were championing the 3 toxic members in my department who had been harassing and causing problems in the communications function. That detail as well I did provide to the Department of Finance officials during the review.
Ms. Ashton, you're just seconds away from time, so we'll just cut it there. Good, thank you. All right, now to Mr. Chong for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. Thank you, Mr. Pickard, for appearing. The Department of Finance announced a halt to Canadian activity at the bank and a review of the bank, Canada's participation in the bank, when you announced your resignation. How many times have you met with the Government of Canada with respect to their review?
I met with 2 officials in their Elgin Street office during the month of July for a total of 75 minutes. I think it was an hour 15 or so, maybe an hour and a half. And after that point, I emailed a variety of documents or observations as I thought of things, or received messages from staff still at AIIB reporting things I thought they might find of interest.
Okay, and have you met with them in person since that
No.
meeting? Okay. Any other contributions other than providing emails and that 75-minute meeting?
No.
Okay. Do you know anything about the announcement on December 9th, a couple of days ago, from the Deputy Prime Minister announcing a further halt to Canadian participation of the bank and an expansion of the review to include the 4 rubrics of investments, governance, management framework, and response to your resignation? Do you know anything about this extended review?
I saw that, yes. I read it in detail. I shared it on X.
But they haven't contacted you about the extended review yet?
No.
Okay. You know, in paragraph 13 of the AIIB's review of your resignation, they took a shot at you, you know, talking about your workplace behaviors and managerial responsibilities. Perhaps you'd like the opportunity now to respond to what appears to be an attempt to smear your reputation. And you're in front of a parliamentary committee, so your testimony is privileged. You cannot be sued in a court of law for it, so you are free to say what you want here.
The main smear against me was that I had a history of disputes with people in my department, and that I was not processing certain documents or dealing with systems in a timely way. Those were among the issues. They also said that I didn't show up at some key meetings or something. So let me just review those with you briefly. There was one meeting when I was on family. I had to run, my mother is in a cancer hospice here in Ottawa, so I had to fly home to see her, and I was on family leave, and I did not attend an interview with National Public Radio in Washington, D.C. that I had arranged for President Jin. But the interview took place, and he successfully communicated his story during that time. That, to me, speaks to the low character of the bank, that they would do that. I'm also in the communications job. So in the comms job, you know, there's all these media, all these NGO groups, all of these fires to put out. And believe me, in AIIB, there's never a dull moment when it comes to issues to deal with. I should also point out that my department massively increased its budget under my leadership. I got 6 new headcounts. I got approval to build a $500,000 media studio. So I might have been the last one to hand in my promotion request for my staff or my budget request, but everything got through and everything was done by the deadline. Maybe my other DGs got theirs in first, but I guess I was busier than them.
Were there any other employees of the bank that felt the same way you did
I know that there are people who feel that way.
at the bank?
Right now, yeah, sure.
They're
Other
just
employees,
not-
you mean?
Yeah, other employees, but they just haven't spoken up about it.
Yes,
Okay.
I do know that. I get emails. There's a spirited discussion on AIIB employee alumni groups. I've been blackballed from joining
Sure.
that.
I have another quick question. About 9 months before you joined, one of the senior people at the AIIB left the door open to lending money to Myanmar's military junta. Did any sort of communications like that take place while you were at the bank?
I don't recall anything dealing with Myanmar. I was asked to meetings to discuss Russian procurement, and there was a debate internally about whether or not there should be a meeting with Russian companies to discuss giving them opportunities to bid on AIIB contracts. And I was asked in no uncertain terms to keep that hush-hush and to ensure that word of it never got known externally. That would be the closest such issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. We'll now go to Mr. Oliphant for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you very much. And I want to begin by saying I'm sorry for the journey that you have been through. It sounds like it's obviously been a trying time for you, and so I wanted to express that to you. I want to back up a little bit to you accepting the job. That I know that there are times when the government is asked to promote people's employment in multilateral agencies and banks. Right. Was this a government appointment, or did you apply for a job and get it?
I applied for the job and I got the job. I applied online, which was the first job I applied online for.
Well, congratulations. I'm not sure you want to hear that. What did you know about the bank when you were joining it?
I knew that it was designed to be a rival to the World Bank, or so I thought. I thought it was China's way, because the legacy financial institutions, whatever their storied accomplishments are, they did not take into account the rising economic heft of China, which from a Chinese point of view meant they should go and create their own vehicle for multilateralism and show the world that they could convene a multilateral institution that could meet the same requirements of multilateral finance as the Western-based MDBs, but to do so in an Asia-based way consistent with China's geopolitical interests.
It interested you then in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I worked here in Ottawa. I worked during the Mulroney government. I worked in the Global Affairs Minister's office. I used to work in this building in 1982 for that person. I had for a year, I'd worked in 6 different countries: Singapore, Tokyo, Seoul, New York City. So
Excellent.
I felt qualified
Good.
for the job.
Jumping ahead to leaving the bank, you said just a few minutes ago you left under your own steam, I think were your words, your own reasons rather. Can you explain about your leaving and what was the decision-making process and all of that?
After the President's office became aware of my concerns on CCP influence in the bank, everything from that office towards me changed. The ombudsman of the bank himself, I believe, a party member, was undertaking an investigation of my department based on complaints from 3 members of my department who did not subscribe to my leadership. I was trying to modernize the department, bring it into the modern age, but I had 3 people who opposed me because they wanted to keep doing things the way that they had been done.
Members of the Communist Party of China?
I don't think so.
Okay, they were not.
No, but they knew that they knew the power structure to go for, and so when everything changed, and the president went from "don't resign" and talking me out of resigning, he went from that to causing through his office an uncertainty in league with some of these people who were engaging what I can only describe as harassment and divide and conquer.
That makes sense to me. I want to go to your, after you left, obviously you've said that the day after the government halted all government activity with the bank, there was an internal review in the bank and now an internal review at finance here, which has taken your information. I understand you don't have documentation for them, but you did an interview with them, so a verbal statement.
Verbal, yep.
And now, after several months, Canada is expanding that review to bring in partners, conversations with Australia, Germany, Sweden, and the United Kingdom into a further thing while we continue to halt our activity. Does this make sense to you as an appropriate response for your allegations?
The Department of Finance officials, they already informed me in July that they were in consultation with allies, G7 allies, concerning the matter. That was already known to me. I do believe, based on my close reading of what the government has announced, that the current review, it's not on my allegations per se, it's on a broad range of concerns. And members may not have noticed this kind of detail at the time, but when I left the bank in June, somebody representing the government of Canada spoke to Bloomberg and made it clear in the reporting that came out that the government, previous to Mr. Pickard's resignation, had certain concerns, including, I believe, about the overconcentration of power in the president's office. So I believe the government, in broadening what it's looking at now, is not just examining what I said, but looking at a whole range of issues that are relevant to whether or not we should remain a member of this.
You have a different partisan background, but it sounds like you feel the government is taking the steps that we need to take, and we're getting somewhere. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you seem to be suggesting that.
I think we're heading in the right direction here on AIIB, and I hope the government pursues this to its logical conclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Oliphant. We'll now go to Mr. Bergeron for 2.5 minutes.
J'aimerais effectivement poursuivre.
I would like to continue that line of questioning. The government suspended its participation indefinitely. You seem to be optimistic or regarding what has taken place and why.
As a Canadian living overseas, under the pressure of that situation, I was and surprised and pleased when the minister announced an immediate review of the situation. So there's no question. I feel like that was a highly supportable decision. And I believe that the current review and the broadening of the review is also a positive development.
You still have...
OK. Croyez-vous que des...
External parties.
Can you please clarify what you mean by external parties?
Des gens qui ne sont pas déjà dans...
People who aren't already within the organization itself, I mean.
I don't know. I feel that we have to ask ourselves as a country, if AIIB were founded today under the current geopolitical conditions and with AIIB supporting China's geopolitical interests, would we and other Western countries join this bank? And I don't think so. I hope not. And why would we do that and give the geopolitical credit for their billions in lending to China, to a hostile country that's preparing for war against Taiwan and its Western allies.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Oops, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. We'll now go to Ms. Ashton for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Well, a question to Mr. Pickard is there a role in this world for a improved Asian infrastructure bank, given the fact that there are so many countries on the Asian continent that face an immense infrastructure gap, and of course where there is immense opportunity?
It's important for members to realize that most of AIIB's financing is co-financing with existing MDBs, such as the World Bank and the Asia Development Bank. So far, most of AIIB's projects are in the future. I think we have to ask ourselves as a country, support multilateralism, and do we want to finance development projects through a Chinese-dominated multilateral or through a Western or Japanese-dominated multilateral? Because those appear to be our current options.
Well, a further question to that is and if I can turn it domestically, I mean, there's been a fair bit of criticism of our own infrastructure bank here in Canada and its governance, lack of transparency, lack of accountability, and in the way in which it's not meeting the stated goals, including, so far, real investments in taking on the infrastructure gap that we face in our own country, particularly in Indigenous and Northern communities. So while obviously you've raised particular concerns, one may also note that it's not as though Canada's infrastructure bank is an incredible model when it comes to dealing with or acting on its mandate. And I'll leave it there. I'm not sure if you have any comments to make on that, but it's certainly some food for thought.
We have a lot to learn from China when it comes to building infrastructure. There's no question about it. But they have a lot to learn from us in terms of respect for communities, listening to people affected, and talking about impact to the countries where they're building infrastructure. And are we putting people on a debt treadmill, building debt traps that they cannot escape from? These are some things that are worthy of further conversation.
There we go. We'll now go to Mr. Chong for 5 minutes. Mr. Seaback, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
There you go.
Mr. Pickard, given your experience, as you say, with CCP party members in the bank, given what I just gave a brief excerpt of the 2017 National Intelligence Law, do you think that this bank is reformable at all to get out of the yoke of influence of the CCP?
I think Chinese Communist Party members in a subterranean way will always be the power network inside of this bank. Having done business in China since the year 2001, I can tell you this is probably, if there are no Communist Party collaborations in this bank or no informal groupings, it would be the only such organization in all of the PRC that could be said of, and I don't believe that it's so. There may not be like an officially registered party committee or cadre in the bank, but I believe that the operation and the collaboration is very similar to such in a more informal way.
I'm going to press you. I appreciate your answer, but do you think it can it be reformed, given the sort of vast influence you're describing of the Chinese Communist Party within the bank itself, and its influence over Chinese citizens as a result of the National Intelligence Law?
While they are all on their best behavior in Beijing right now at the bank, I would say that so long as we have the current geopolitical situation and so long as we have the Chinese Communist Party trying to work to undermine Western democracies and to have China replace the United States as the #1 power, it is impossible for that to happen.
Thanks. I want to turn to the bank's report, and I don't want to go to any specific parts of it, but Given what you've described, again, as the influence of the Chinese Communist Party, the structure of the bank itself, which I'm sure you're familiar with, what would you say would be the possibilities that their own internal report is going to be fair, balanced, and fulsome?
I would not have confidence in any report coming from that bank. The objectivity, the professionalism, the lack of independence. In my case, the lack of any independent report produced from a department with Chinese Communist Party officials and with senior executives criticizing me publicly while the report's being written. I mean, I would not trust that. I would not trust anything coming from them. And I don't think they have the resources anyway. It's very lean internally. There's not a lot of bandwidth there. It's understaffed.
And so to be clear, this report was an internal report done by, this wasn't external auditors that came in to look at and sort of balance what the bank is saying versus what you're saying.
No.
This was, would you being in the PR business yourself, would you hazard to say that their internal investigation was more of an exercise in PR than it was in fact-finding?
Well, yesterday the Global Times accused me of hype and smears, so I feel like I have some familiarity with this. I feel like that's exactly what they've done to me, leveled various allegations in a hatchet job report. That's what's the expression we should look for? Was it a kangaroo court or is it a snow job? But they did not do an independent report. I refused to participate in that report. They gave me no access to my documents. To the member's earlier question, I couldn't have provided them because they wouldn't let me have them anyway.
So wait a minute. In their own internal report that they wanted you to participate in, they wouldn't give you access to any documents as part of that investigation?
They refused because I wanted access to the documents so that I could create a timeline or provide examples. And I was completely locked out and told that that was not going to happen.
Thank you very much.
And this was done by the Brazilian legal counsel of the bank, Alberto Nino, at whose home I was supposed to have dinner the weekend I left the bank, actually. I didn't show up for dinner, so he wrote the report saying I didn't show up at meetings.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Seeback. And now for our final portion of this round, we'll go to Madame Lalonde.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming in front of us, Mr. Picard. It was mentioned, and I want to take you back on this a little bit more, if you could share some thoughts, that as we mentioned, the review of Canada's participation in the AIIB has been tasked to the Department of Finance. And I would like you to maybe help us out a little bit further to explain your interaction with the department as part of the review process, but also give us your view on the importance of this review being led by non-partisan professional public servants.
I don't know the people in a three-dimensional or deep way who are conducting this review. We had a single meeting. And while I've been asked to provide information, and always welcome to do so, and there's always been a polite acknowledgement, thank you, Mr. Pickard, for sending this document. Feel free to send any further documents. While that's the case, there haven't been any follow-up questions, and I would say there's been a limited degree of intellectual curiosity in finding out all of the details here. I would have thought, given the sensational nature of some of my allegations, that there might have been more questioning.
Thank you. And I guess it's a perfect segue. So on that note, at any point in your tenure at the AIIB, did you push for any internal reform to address some of the governance issues you have raised since your departure? And did you have any success in these efforts?
Well, on one particular issue, I was certainly a catalyst for urging the bank to take and engage civil society more deeply, and to also address what is really a glaring issue of gender at the bank. So on those two issues, while it wasn't really my remit to tell the bank president or my executive colleagues what to do. I wasn't tasked with the power of recommending a solution. In my department, we were catalysts for taking these functions more seriously. And we advocated.
I'm sorry, maybe. So my understanding is that your department and yourself advocated, but you didn't push for any internal changes. Am I correct? Like, I'm just trying to better understand.
Well, I wasn't, I mean, I pushed for, the ombudsman of the bank was supposed to have published a report, for example, having looked into the situation in my department. 12 of the department's members backed me up. 4, including the one Communist Party member, were opposed. We never heard anything back from that. So I never, and I left so quickly after that, I never had a chance to call for improvement in the Ombudsman office. I would say if I am calling for improvements, it would be in the human resources function, which operates more like kind of a secret police inside of the bank. I would call for improvement in the IT department, which rather than enable communication, which is my job, acted more like a security system, which led to well-known infamous surveillance inside of the bank. So I would call for reforms of that too. And I would also call for reform of the system of non-resident board members. If there were a resident board at this bank where people in Beijing, like at other MDBs, would see what's going on, then perhaps things might have been different.
Thank you very much. I'm going to leave. Is there anything further that you would like to share in front of this committee? Because I think we have about a minute left.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for listening to me. It's a very emotionally charged experience. I had to lay everything on the line for this. So it's been kind of intense for me to talk about this. So thank you for listening. And if you have any follow-up questions, let me know. And if you'd like any further communication, I'm sure the committee staff can give you my particulars.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. You know, I think for our colleagues here, Mr. Picard and I share a background in communication. And I dare say if there'd be a lot of communication professionals in Canada and in the United States, or Europe for that matter, that could take the transcript of Mr. Picard's testimony here, strip out Asian Infrastructure Bank, and insert the name of their company. I have a great deal of empathy for somebody who's in charge of communication for an organization that behaves in a way that you can't, you know, very deep to your core support. Mr. Picard, thank you for your testimony today, and you leave with our blessings. Thank you.